President Barack Obama is a lying, foreign-born socialist committed to turning our country into Nazi Germany by slowly eroding our rights and expanding the size of the federal government. On the other hand, ex-President Bush was a tyrant, crazy fundamentalist who would have torn up the Constitution if he had the liberty to turn our country into a theocracy. What I just said is an example of freedom of speech, one of the keystones to any democratic system. Freedom of speech sets the stage in the arena for the exchange of information, ideas, and views. And as a participant in that, you have the opportunity to expand your mind about, learn about different views and opinions, expanding your outreach and look upon the world and yourself. But as a finite person with limited time, ability, and intelligence, you can't know everything about everything. I can't. I know that for a fact. Thus, I rely on news and media to have information about the world around me. But not just me. According to the Pew Research Center on the website journalism.org, 56% of Americans say that they watch the news all or most of the time. But the question we need to ask is this information reliable? Is it a good source? And that is why today I'm going to be informing you on the cost and cause of media and news bias. I hope that by the end of my speech you will understand news bias and you'll be able to have some kind of pointers and tips on how to counter it and move forward. First, we'll be looking at the cost of it, secondly, the cause, and lastly, we'll be looking at some solutions to how to do it. So let's talk about the problem with media bias first. In a 2009 paper by the National Bureau of Economic Statistics, the researchers stated that media bias is characterized more of an omission of facts rather than a misrepresentation, meaning that certain facts are left out and others are stated, which creates kind of a different view of the world. This is made clear in Jonathan S. Morris's study titled Slanted Objectivity, which appeared in the September 2007 issue of Social Science Quarterly. In it, he found that a high percentage of people who primarily watched Fox News believed, in fact, that Saddam Hussein was in fact connected to 9/11. This is as opposed to many viewers who watch CNN and MSNBC who didn't feel that. Also, another problem that arises from media bias was stated in another paper by the National Bureau of Economic Statistics, written by Stefano Della Vigna and Ethan Kaplan, titled Fox News Effects, Media Bias, and Voting. In it, she found, by studying the effect of the introduction of Fox News into media and news markets, that they were able to increase Republican voter turnout by 3 to 8%, which might not sound like a lot, but in the year 2000, when the presidential election was as close as it was, that had a huge effect on our nation. So understanding that media bias has a problem, that it can cause differences in the view of the world, like how people perceive reality, and also can affect elections, we need to ask ourselves, what is the cause of this problem? Before I go into the cause, I want to make a simple disclaimer. And through my research, I realized one thing, that we live in a dynamic world, meaning that there's thousands of variables always acting upon the system at once. There's multiple actors, and it's impossible to simply pinpoint one thing as the sole cause of any problem. But the problems there are some major actors, as I said before, and the one that I found that was pertinent to our classroom is one that was described in a paper by the Stanford University, written by Robert P. Vallone, Lee Ross, Mark L. Lepper, entitled The Hostile Media Phenomenon. In it, they describe how bias, or the perception of media bias, is often an outcome of our own personal bias, perceiving that the news and media that is opposing our view is biased, and simply stating it that way. They found this in a very interesting study. They took a research paper on the death penalty. They brought in, and the research paper was actually inconclusive according to them. They brought in people who were pro and against death penalty, had them look at the paper, and the funny thing was, after that, they asked them what they felt about the paper. The pro-death penalty people said that the paper supported their views, while the people who were against the death penalty said the same thing from the same research document. Then that highlighted how we can come into a situation with our personal bias, and it actually affects our perception of what we read. Now, understanding that that our own personal bias and perception can lead us to listen to certain news outlets that we feel agree with us, and thus we deem them as unbiased. And also understanding that a news and media outlet wants more viewers, because more viewers means bigger ad revenue. And understanding that, we need to ask, what can we do about it? In my search for an answer, there was no definitive one in any specific paper I read. But I found one through my own experience, actually. First, I read a paper posted in the September 2007 issue of Social Science Quarterly, written by Tanya J. Atkins and Phyllis U. Washburn, titled Measure Media Bias, a content analysis of Time and Newsweek coverage of domestic social issues from 1975 to 2000. And in it they found that in fact Time and Newsweek were unbiased. They didn't express a very strong bias in the news and media. And I was like, great, that's what I'll read from now on. Later, about the next day, I read a paper posted on the UCLA Newsroom website written by Meg Sullivan in 2005, which stated that according to a UCLA researcher, who quantified a bias in the media, they found that the media was in fact biased. And that the most unbiased media was the NewsHour with Brit Hume on Fox News. I immediately set out to discredit that same research study. I started to look at the methodology as close as I could to understand how they came to that conclusion. I'm not saying I didn't look at the methodology from the research before, but I took it at face value. The second one, which disagreed with my views, instantly I was trying to break it down. How come? Because I myself am a liberal. I have democratic views, and that's how I feel. But it was such an interesting fact to realize that even in studying about bias, I found my own bias acting out without me trying to. And this led me to my solution. My solution was to realize when I come into media and other things, I need to practice an open mind. I need to accept new ideas. I need to really listen to what is being said by the opposing argument. I need to try to understand where they're coming from. Also, in some other practical facts, when you're watching news and media, you need to realize that when you're watching an opinion piece, a host who's mostly expounding opinions and stuff of that nature, and take it as that, as an opinion piece. We need to practice an open mind and stay away from opinion pieces and stuff like that. Also, seek out different news coverage, not just from the same new media source every day. So, understanding the problem, seeing that the problem can cause diverging views of reality. It can also lead to swing elections. The cause is always seems to come from ourselves, although there's many other factors in it. One of the main ones is our own appreciation to views that agree with us instead of views that oppose ours. And lastly, some simple solutions which I pointed out a second ago. But I felt that the solution was best stated by a quote by Herbert Spencer. In it he said that there is a principle which is a bar against all information, which is proof against all arguments, and which cannot fail to keep a man in everlasting ignorance. That principle is contempt prior to investigation.